Now it's time for my perspective guest. My guest today is a man whose first book, One Small Voice, that came out 2 years ago, was an Observer Best Debut Novel of 2023. It was also shortlisted for the Authors Club Best First Novel Award and the Society of Authors Gordon Bowker Volcano Prize. Riding on the success of that now comes his second novel. It's called Deviants. It tells the story of three Indian men from the same family, but through different generations, who fall in love with other men and how it affects them and their family as well. Santanu Bhattacharya joins us now from London. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme today. Let's talk briefly, first of all, about the start of your career before we talk about your new book. It must have been incredible for you how One Small Voice was received and you won all that recognition for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, thank you for having me on your show. And absolutely, it was a very surreal experience, even thinking back now, because I was writing One Small Voice for 10 years. And I didn't come from, I didn't study English in university. I didn't come from the world of publishing or writing. So it was very much a hobby project. So even to think of that as a published book today and the reception it got is still quite overwhelming. And I'm extremely grateful.
And since then, you've now followed it up pretty quickly. This one obviously didn't take 10 years to write, with Deviants. Tell us about it.
So Deviants happened quite quickly. It happened over the course of summer. The first draft took about 4 to 6 weeks to write. Deviants is the story of three gay men in three different generations in India. And like you said, they all belong to the same family. And each of them is trying to find their way into queerness and love and dignity against the tides of their times. And the fact that they're from the same family, so they're related as uncles and nephews. And the fact that they're from the same family also brings out questions of the legacies that we leave behind, the inheritance that the next generation gets, languages that families use or don't use to talk about these kind of social taboos and things like that. So it's just, it was very interesting to put them in the same family and have this intergenerational lens on homosexuality.
How, which of them do you think has the hardest time? Just thinking about it, the oldest, Sukumar, fell in love, we're talking about mid-1970s here, with the attitudes of the time. Basically, he was forced to keep it secret, wasn't he?
Absolutely. So I think it's very interesting because each generation has kind of its own set of questions to answer and its own cross to bear in a way. So Sukumar's generation, Sukumar's a young man when we meet him in the 1970s. And for his generation, it was very much about keeping it a secret. And even if people did have a clue of what was going on, nobody would talk about it in the open. But for Mambro's generation, when we meet him, he is a teenager in the 1990s. That is very close to my generation. And that is where there was a lot of activism. So we were very much kind of inducted into the language of what it meant, homosexuality and gay and lesbian and queer rights and so on. We were very aware of what was happening and what, activists were campaigning for. But at the same time, there was the colonial era law that criminalized gay sex. And it had been in the Indian Penal Code from our time of independence, but it was never fully used until the 1990s and throughout the early 2000s. And that was in a way because of the activism, which brought it back into focus, but also because of the rise of the internet, where it became really common and really possible to out gay men having sexual encounters. And this was happening across the world, but in India especially, that law was being used against queer men. So there was a question of safety and security as well that came with that awareness and the understanding that the state machinery is working against you. The legal machinery, has laws in place that would work against you.
And you also managed to, you even bring it right up to date, don't you, with your other character, the youngest, who's just 17 now. And his story is all tied up with the internet and data apps and that side of it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I really wanted to explore what it has meant for that space to open up, because the queer space in India, every time I go back, seems to be very open, seems to be very exuberant. There are more and more people co-opting themselves into the queer space, which is great to see. And I did want to pay tribute to that advance and that progress. But at the same time, there's also a question of technology and lives being led on apps, which is the reality for a lot of people today, and especially young people who don't know of a world outside of that technology. and what it means to have that very atomized existence where you could find community, but it's all virtual. And then at the end of the day, it could all disappear and you're pretty much left with yourself. But also the question of AI and algorithms and where it's leading us. And for a very vulnerable 17-year-old, what it means to be kind of led down these wormholes of algorithms without necessarily having the tools to process them.
So looking at the three generations that you're covering, how much easier do you think it's got? I mean, presumably there are, depends on the individual, of course, but there is still a lot of opposition and a lot of ill feeling towards people who want to practice their own sexuality.
Oh, absolutely. I think it was 2023 when the petitioners brought to the Supreme Court request a petition to equalize same-sex marriage, so equal marriage laws. And that was struck down. So it was rejected by the Supreme Court of India. So there's still a lot of opposition. It was rejected, was kind of argued against by the government of the day as well. There's a lot of opposition. There's a lot of kind of social taboo still around it. It is a space I feel that it's very fluid now. I think the decriminalization in 2018 of gay sex has opened up the space in a way. It has given the queer community legal cover. At least you're not ending up in jail. But at the same time, to be able to get equal treatment everywhere, at your home, at the workplace, and so on, when you're out on the street, your safety, your security, all of those are still big questions, and we still need to answer those. And in a country like India, where we're talking about millions of men and women and transgender people, every person, like you said, will have their own experience. But how do we make it more inclusive, and how do we make it, have laws in place that protect all of us in whatever situation we are?
Tell us finally about yourself. I mean, I've introduced you as being in London. You're in London now, but do you think India will always have a special place in your heart? Are you always going to write about India, do you think?
I mean, a place that I grew up in, and a place I belong to, and a place that I spent 3/4 of my life in will always be a place that, I understand best, no matter which country I choose to live in later. It will never have the same kind of resonance with me as India will. So in a way, India is going to be a strong part of my writing in the future, as it has been until now. I think so, yeah.
Good to hear. Keep those links going, as it were. Thanks very much for joining us on the programme. Many congratulations for the success of your first book. I hope Deviants does just as well. Santanu Bhattacharya joining us there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.